Hello, everyone, and welcome to Good Tech, an ongoing discussion about ethics and technology. I'm Elizabeth Perry with Idka. Today, we're going to take a dive into the world of marketing. Marketing, that machine that's supposed to propel us into the spotlight, give us visibility, recognition, raise profile, success. All businesses strive for these things, but are we doing it wrong? Has our obsession with data brought us closer to our customers or further away? And what can we do better? We'll tackle those questions and more on this show. Before I introduce today's guest, I want to remind everyone that questions during the show can be called in. Dial the number on your screen, and we'll do the best to answer them. So today's guest has written extensively on the topic of marketing with a perspective that may surprise some of you marketers out there, but it's a perspective that I believe is an important one to consider. It is my pleasure to welcome author, veteran marketing expert, humanist, consumer historian, Jason Voiovich.
Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are in the world, and thank you, Elizabeth. I appreciate it.
Well, welcome to the show, and thanks for joining us. So we sort of met virtually because I read an article that you wrote that resonated with me, as I'm sure it resonated with other marketers and people in general. The article is entitled "Losing Our Religion," and it outlines some of the way in which the overabundance of data, while seen as the holy grail to marketers, can actually be a bad thing for marketing. So I was intrigued, and before we go into now, I want to sort of take a historical perspective, talk about the evolution of marketing. But let's start with your father. You talk a lot about your father in this article. He earned his chops, as you say, during the Mad Men era of advertising back in the 60s. I watched the show Mad Men, loved it, great style. But Mad Men actually comes from the men of Madison Avenue in New York, where advertising had its heyday. But you say most marketing was as bad back then as it is now. So you got a lot to cover, but take it away. What's it like? And go ahead.
No, it's my dad. His name was Donald Voiovich. Great guy. And you know what he used to tell me. I spent time with him as a little kid in advertising and marketing. You know, most of us go to college and we go into advertising or marketing, you know, because we think, oh gosh, I'm not quite smart enough to be an accountant, and finance seems boring. So I'm going to go into marketing because that sounds fun. But for me, I was born into it. And I remember going with my dad on client calls to photo shoots and working with him on paste up in one of a spare room in our house. And he used to tell me a little story about how to understand, you know, marketing and what he did. And he divided marketing into three big buckets. And I remember this as a little kid. He said, hey, about 10%, they drew a little pyramid on his artboard, and he said 10%, he drew a little line at the top, and he said 10% of marketing is fantastic. It's very good. It's, you know, it's meaningful, targeted, differentiated, all of the things that you want marketing to be. He said, let's draw another line, and let's say 20% is, you know, it's professionally okay. It's certainly most store circulars and things like that fall into that category. But he said the rest of it, all 70% that falls underneath that, is just god-awful. It's terrible. And he said, you know, look at the classified ads. He took out the newspaper and he said, look at the average ad. And I bet what he had me do as a little kid, he said, cut up the newspaper and put the ads into the three different categories. And it was easy. No matter what newspaper we picked, no matter what brochures, you could put them into one of those three categories, and it worked out to be 10, 20, 70. here's the thing. He passed away a number of years ago, and I was sitting in graduate school at the University of Minnesota, and a professor of mine got up on the board, very experienced. He essentially ran the Federal Trade Commission Truth in Advertising in the United States. The first non-lawyer to hold that position. He goes up to the board and he said, all right, students, we need to talk about advertising and we need to talk about marketing. There's just a truth in marketing, and he draws a triangle on the board. This is in 2010. When my dad drew it for me, it was 1984. And he said, here's 10%, here's 20%. And what he did in the last 70% is he called it badvertising, which I thought was a wonderful, wonderful term that I adopted and used now ever since. But I thought to myself, that was really the impetus for this entire thought process. Was I was under the impression especially over the last 10 to 15 years, that the more data we had, the better marketing should be getting better, not worse. And it struck me that in between 1984 and earlier and 2010, we'd gotten no better. We still saw the same 10, 20, 70 kind of breakdown. And the whole idea behind beginning the research for this book and beginning to think about, is challenging a fundamental assumption that data and what we are giving up for that data in a marketing context for all of us consumers, is it worth it? Is it making marketing better? Because that's been the promise, right? That the more data we have, the better marketing we get.
Right. I mean, data, when in Marketing 101 says we collect data on our customer so we know the customer better. And Marketing 101 says you're supposed to define the persona, right? There's the persona and then the segment. You're supposed to define that, and that you can't do that without data.
I think there's a confusion, and we hear about that a lot recently. Because data has become so easy to get, and it's not hard anymore. I mean, back in the early part of our careers, and many of you who are watching this are likely, thinking about the same thing, is back in 1984 or 1990 or 1995, getting data about customers wasn't easy. Especially getting real-time data was almost impossible. Research was expensive, time-consuming. So you needed this other thing called evidence. Evidence is kind of the higher level, where evidence can be multiple things. It could be interviews with customers. It could be kind of logic about, kind of if A, then B. If people own this product, they probably also own this product. You had to make a lot of assumptions, and you needed kind of multiple lines of evidence. You needed to treat people as kind of full people. But with the advent of marketing technology, and that's essentially all big tech is, Google, Facebook, Apple, Netflix, all of them are essentially just marketing companies. That's all they do, is they are collecting discrete data points and have made a lot of that process so much easier that people have forgotten. They've forgotten the link between, that all humans are just sums of data points, where, back in the day, we couldn't make that assumption because technologically it wasn't possible to make that assumption. So I think we're confusing data and evidence, and kind of data. We're confusing data with truly understanding the customer. Data is just one way to understand the customer. There are lots of others.
And what was that graphic that you had to illustrate the graphic that you had sent to put up on the screen? Is that one?
Let's show that scatter plot. And essentially, this one comes from Nassim Nicholas Taleb's Twitter feed. He's the author of The Black Swan and the Incerto series of books, Fooled by Randomness. And essentially, this chart shows the actual data that correlates job performance and IQ. And essentially, what's happening here is the psychologists in the study used some statistics, and they drew a line in the middle of that data set. And when you draw a line like that, you can infer this correlation between those, that as IQ goes up, job performance increases. Well, just look at the chart. Just look at it with your own eyes. No sane person would take a look at that and think there's a meaningful relationship between data points. When you look at real humans, the data are really messy. The data often don't tell you what you think that they're telling you, because humans are full individuals. We do lots of contradictory stuff. We do bizarre things that don't make any sense just because we had a bad day, or we had we ate some bad Thai food. That was me last night. I did weird stuff because I ate bad Thai food. Right. So, we can do, I think that we are in marketing, we often overestimate, how good the data are and what they can tell us. And we overfit in that, and Taleb is right. We often overfit, really broad conclusions to really messy data. And it really comes down to this. He has a saying in one of his books. He said, if you see fraud and you don't say fraud, you are the fraud. And, essentially I look at it and say, if I see what I'm seeing in marketing and I don't call fraud, I'm the fraud. And I don't accept that anymore. We need to call fraud on this. This isn't making sense. We need to call it out, because as consumers, we are giving more and more of our data with to the FANG companies, the Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google. We're giving them all this data, and the hope is that we get better stuff back, and we get better advertising back, and we get better products back. But in reality, what are we giving up for that? And what are we giving up in terms of privacy? What are we giving up in terms of social control? We see that happening certainly in China and other areas where kind of the social currency movement, that's certainly what's going on. It's certainly what's going on with Facebook and cryptocurrency. Like who trusts this organization, to manage your money? This is where we're going, and this is why it's important for us to call this out now, because marketing has driven, you think tech drives what's going on. We forget in 2000, that no one thought Google would make any money. No one thought, everyone thought this would be like pets.com. We only think now in 2019 that it was inevitable. It was not inevitable then. So we're in this position where we have kind of given away a lot of this information to companies that really they survive because marketing, kind of from a marketing philosophy, they said, how about we give away things for free, and we just won't show people the hidden cost of that until it's too late. And now we're trying to kind of herd the cats back into the stable, and cats aren't going back.
No. So who's the biggest culprit? Is it big tech, or is it, in terms of the overabundance of data? And I mean, because everybody talks about Facebook and they're building profiles on us and they're getting it wrong. And you need to talk about data is not always correct. But who are the biggest culprits in this?
I think that, it's easy to look at, Facebook and, Google and Netflix. It's easy to do that. It's easy to look at all those organizations and say, hey, you're doing bad stuff. Okay? But we're still buying it. We're still using it. No one's saying, well, I'm going to delete my Facebook account. Great. That's nice. How many people have actually done it? How many people have said, you know what? I understand what Google is doing, and I'm just not going to use Google anymore. Yes, there are people who are doing those. So as consumers, we share some of that, some of that accountability for, for not educating ourselves, for not getting to the point where we understand the consequences of the actions and saying, okay, are we making an informed choice? That there's a return on that investment. I'm giving Google certain amounts of information. Here's what I'm getting back. does that balance out in my mind? And if it does, great, being comfortable with it. And if it's not, choosing an alternative or working through those, because those alternatives exist, but they take a little bit more work. And you begin to see consumers starting to fight back a little bit. I've always thought about marketing as a bit of a cat and mouse game. As soon as, marketing kind of comes up with a new toy that works. You remember the listicle? The listicle 3-4 years ago was the tactic that worked until it didn't, because people figured out that, it was just worthless.
Well, tell the audience what that is, listicle.
A listicle is an article that's got a headline that says something like the 5 ways to lose weight this summer, or the 10 key things you need to do in order to do X. Now, you still see some of those around, but the click rates on that particular style of article have basically regressed to the mean. And, they're no more effective than most other types of headlines or content. So, when I think about the cat and mouse game, I think, yeah, big tech is a big cat that's had the little mouse under its paw for quite a while, and it seems impossible to get out. But, we're squirrely little guys. We're getting out of there, and we're going to find other things that work as those options are beginning to present themselves. Because frankly, the market has kind of reached monopoly and oligopoly in those areas. Well, that's a ripe situation for other organizations to come up with better ideas and provide those. It seemed like, remember, back in the 80s that, we would be with the Bell operating companies in the United States, the monopolies on telecommunications, forever. Right. That they would just be there forever until they weren't. And then they were gone essentially overnight.
Mm-hmm.
So Facebook will never go away. Yeah, well, for sure. It's just a matter of what do we replace it with, and what do we want when that happens.
Right. So, and the other thing that's happening right now that drives me crazy, and probably everyone else too, but they still fall for it, is the personalization, right? The ads that target you when you buy a suitcase. So, then they come back at you and try to sell you another suitcase. When I already bought the suitcase, I don't want the suitcase anymore. What about that? I mean, you describe in your article, this is being misguided, this personalization. And you say, quote, "There are endless floating ads that stalk me as I try to read the morning news."
Yeah, I think here's how I look at that. When you think about, there's a difference between personalization and humanization. Okay?
Right.
When you think about personalization, what you're really talking about in a marketing context, let's break it down to how it actually works in practice. Because most people don't think about that. They think, oh, I bought this and I get an ad for something else. And they don't think about the mechanics of how that actually works. So if you think about, okay, I bought an exercise bike on Amazon. Let's say that I did that. Okay. Mm-hmm. What Amazon is doing is it's taking a look at the database of other people who bought not only that exercise bike, but other exercise bikes. And it said, okay, I know what the profiles are of all those other users. They're doing a multiple regression analysis to figure out which other products are people buying along with it, in which ways, and how do those profiles match my profile? It's reasonably sophisticated, but again, it's just an educated guess. As we saw from Taleb's graph, real consumer data is really messy. And when you try to do multiple regression inside essentially a cloud of data points, you're going to come up with some pretty humorous stuff when you let the artificial intelligence just do its work on its own without humans to say, whoa, yeah, I get it that a certain number of people bought the second season on DVD of Stranger Things, but that's probably not related to the exercise bike. Or I'm probably not going to buy another exercise bike once I just bought that one. So, that you think, oh, well, the AI will just get better. Maybe. It's been multiple years and it's not. A lot of there's that old saying, if you see it on PowerPoint, it's artificial intelligence. If you see it in Python, it's machine learning. And most of the time, marketing people talk about AI. And what was the article in the New York Times or in Wired? I can't remember that. It just said artificial intelligence is like saying quality now. It means precisely nothing. So, when you get to it at a base level, you're just trying to run some statistics to figure out, do you want fries with that? Well, I can tell you that McDonald's is a lot more successful with those 6 words than Amazon is to this point with all of its artificial intelligence. Do you want fries with that? From what I read, the estimate was it has created something like $40 billion in value for McDonald's Corporation over the time that they first asked everyone to say that phrase. When you bought the hamburger, they said, do you want fries with that? And the amount of incremental value they generated. So the point is, how do we say, yeah, there's a role for that data to help us, maybe see some patterns we might not have seen, but how do we start to look at people as whole people? How do we start to do that? Because if we don't, people will resist. No one likes being treated like a number. We've kind of known that. I mean, how long have you and I been, in the professional field? Like, how many places? When was Office Space? That movie. When did that movie come out? 95, 96. We still haven't learned the lesson from Office Space. I mean, really, the Bobs? We have not figured out. Okay, if you have not seen that movie, Gen Zers, that's what life was like back then in the cubicle. So go check that out. Go to Netflix and check that out.
Right.
So yeah, it's really, and I think that's that key difference. Personalization is a technical kind of a statistics exercise fraught with all the dangers of that. Humanization is a human exercise. It's a connection exercise. It's something that, frankly, for a lot of marketing folks and consumers is so much more real, so much more tangible, so much more, so much more gratifying, career-wise, to really solve a problem that a customer has is at the heart of why I got into marketing. I believe that, marketing is the best tool we've ever come up with as a society to link customer needs with businesses and offers. Okay? At the foundation, that's what it is. And we have confused kind of scientism and this overuse of statistics with the core mission, which is people have needs. How do we solve them for the whole person? How do we not do that? How do we at that same time not poison the well where our customers don't trust us anymore? Because if that begins to happen, and that is happening, where customers don't trust us any longer. No one's trusted advertisers. Okay, everyone said, well, they're liars. They're cheats. They're just going to get you to buy things you don't need. But once you start to, but you still buy stuff. You still have that need, because at its core, it's like, hey, I bought this one product and I knew that it either worked or it didn't. But this is different now. When you think about the long tail effect of giving Facebook all this information or giving Amazon all this information, and it can hurt you well into the future, that's new. That is very, very new. And if we lose that connection with trust, we won't get it back. And that's what I'm afraid of, is that marketing won't work any longer because no one trusts us. No one trusts anything we say.
And then it hurts the business's bottom line.
That's exactly it. When we think about the economics of it, that marketing is critical for businesses to find customers and to sell products and services. We kind of forget we'd love for, I'd love to ride a unicorn into town where, everyone had all the money they needed and we could all live in kind of a Star Trek utopia where resources don't matter anymore. but the reality is that they do. And we need businesses to be able to generate the kind of economic activity that helps us, improve our lives. Well, if marketing fails to work or stops working, the risk to our economic way of life is not trivial. That could be catastrophic, and we have to sound the alarm on this earlier rather than later.
You talk about, in your article, you talk about easy data. Tell the audience what that means and what the problem is, and experimentation and spaghetti to the wall. And
well, this is something that a lot of folks that have been in marketing understand pretty well, but people outside of our world don't really see that often. So let's take a real example of running something like a Google pay-per-click campaign. So essentially what that is I'm going to go and I'm going to try to sell my product or service as a little ad on the side of Google. And everyone's seen these, but most people sort of don't know how that works. Okay? Essentially what you do as the advertiser is you go into Google and you say, hey, when people search on the following list of words and phrases, I want my ad to pop up on the side, because I think that if people are searching for this, they're going to want to see my ad. And again, anyone in marketing is like, okay, yeah, I get it. But most people don't, the research tells us that most people don't really know the difference between an organic search result, something that came up because the Google's algorithm, that the website, met the criteria that it should come up, and the advertising sitting right next to it. And part of that is, that's kind of what Google's trying to do, because Google is an advertising company. Google makes better than 90% of its money on advertising, not on search. It's on advertising. So in practice, how does that work? You think, okay, I clicked on this. How many times have you seen ads on the side of there that just seem bizarre, that seem like, okay, that is the stupidest thing I've ever seen? Well, here's the thing. From an advertiser's perspective, what I do is I'm looking at a lot of different keywords. I think they might be appropriate for me, but I don't really know. So I'm going to pick a lot of them, because it's essentially free and really easy to pick a lot of different keywords. It's also easy for me to create a lot of different advertising. So what I want to do is I want to create as many ads and as many keywords as I can, and I can afford, to be able to test the connections between all those things. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to figure out which ones will get you to click on it. So which ones are the best ones? And when we were talking about percentages, it's fractions of percent make differences. So I might get a click-through rate of anything for, 0.2% to 2.5% is a really typical click-through rate. That means that, always think of, when you think statistics, always think the opposite of the statistic that you've just been told. If I have a click-through rate of 2.5%, what is the non-click-through rate? Non-click-through rate is 97.5%. That means for 97.5% of the people who look at that ad, it's irrelevant. Think about that for a second. Most of what you're seeing on Google is garbage. It's absolute garbage, and it's irrelevant to you. But, a few things are. And there is no cost to me if you don't click on that ad. That's when people say PPC, stands for pay per click. Let's break down exactly what that means. Pay per click. You don't pay per look, you pay per click. So if you don't click on it, those 97.5 people, I don't pay for them. I only pay for the people that click. So there's no incentive for me to, and there's some nuances in there, but there's very little incentive for me to really care about the 90% of people, who aren't clicking. Think about that from your point of view and the customer's point of view. Most of what you're seeing is junk. So, when that's where that 10, 20, 70 rule still works. You could do the same thing I did as a kid with the newspaper with Google search results. You could say, okay, of all the ads I'm going to see in an average day on Google, how many are good? how many are okay, and how many are junk. And I bet you'll find the same 10, 20, 70 rule, if not worse. You might only find a small few. So you can make the argument, and I certainly have, that marketing is getting worse, not better. Data is making us worse, not better. And that's kind of the mind blower on this, is that, holy crap, the more we rely on this, the worse it gets. So it's a matter of kind of poor understanding of statistics, but also platforms that disincentivize, that basically have very low cost for failure. And that's kind of a big tech ethos, right? That we want to fail fast, fail often, and fail, fail, fail. And I'm going to find the needle in the haystack that works. Well, being on the other side of that, throwing spaghetti at the wall is really fun, unless you're the wall. Then it sucks.
Yeah. So again, our bottom line, we're hurting ourselves. And like you said earlier, maybe people never will come back. They'll get so mad at us that they won't come back at all. We lose them. And so, but yet people are so in love with data and this pay-per-click and all these sort of techniques you're talking about. Let's talk about content marketing for a second. You put a graph up there. Yeah, there it is. Content marketing, quality versus quantity. What's working? What's not working?
Yeah, this is I think when people talk about data and they talk about all this, the pushback I get is from the inbound marketing crowd. And for those of you who don't know, outbound marketing is that's going to be me trying to project out and broadcast out and sell you something. Okay. Inbound marketing is creating content, educational content, entertaining content that will get you to engage with me. So instead of me broadcasting out to you, I put content out there as kind of like a magnet for people to come in, It's a wonderful idea. But just like the cat and mouse game, people have gotten wise to it and have realized that. So what the chart shows is that, we were at a point earlier, right around 2010, where I kind of call that peak content, where, there are a few folks doing that really well. There are a few folks in Minneapolis where I live who do really, really excellent work in content marketing, that put out excellent content. They publish the Delta Airlines Sky magazine, the wedding guides, very, very good stuff. There wasn't much of it, but what there was very high quality. So it worked really well. The more people that got in there and realized that, hey, I could do somewhat less quality stuff and just kind of do iterative stuff and still get results. Well, the quantity started to go up really quickly, but the quality started to decrease. And I call the inflection point where those two curves meet each other, essentially the Fire Festival. If we remember the Fire Festival, where it was essentially a kind of rich kid, 1%er festival on an island where you could go and spend thousands of dollars for this super exclusive party, FYRE, very millennial, very hipster, super trendy, complete disaster. Documentaries on both Hulu and Netflix about that. Very, very entertaining. I recommend them. But essentially, the point is, in our field in marketing, that's where content marketing essentially, pardon the language, shit the bed. And, because what they use that kind of content marketing strategy as a complete fake. And the quality has declined precipitously since then. The quantity has continued to skyrocket. So now we're in a position where many people have started to distrust even this like non-intrusive marketing where it's all about educating you and it's all about providing good information and hoping you come back. Well, people don't trust that anymore. So, I love you inbound guys. I really do. But, we have gone to the point where we played with our new toy too hard and it broke. and people don't trust it anymore. And this is what we're talking about. We come up with a new toy, we get super excited about the new toy, and we play with it really hard. It breaks, we sit in the corner and cry, and then we beg our mom to go buy us a new toy so that we can fool people all over again. We're not learning how do we play with the toy in the right way so that we keep our toys and our toys are still fun.
Yeah. So yeah, it's so fascinating. We've got so much ground to cover on marketing. Marketing is everything, right? I mean, we're the, it's sales, it's everything. It's so important, and yet we're doing it wrong. And so now we want to know, what are we supposed to do, Jason? We talk about, like at Idka, for example, we talk about our customers, respect for our customers. So we believe it's, privacy is at the core of what we do. So we respect people's privacy. Not tracking people is definitely fraught with, challenges, but we believe that ultimately the respect will be for our benefit as well as our customers. What do you think about that? Like, how else are we supposed to treat our customer?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I'll need to back it up a little bit it was easy to it's easy to call fraud. It's, when you look at all of the data, and I've written about this for years. It's almost too easy, to take a look at where we're going wrong. It is very difficult to think what's going on at the heart of marketing. And I think what data has led us to is a dehumanization process. And as I worked on my research, it helped to have that framework to help me understand what was going on and how might we fix it. And dehumanization is three really nasty processes that are, that feed back on each other. The one is really about cognitive dissonance, that when we're doing stuff that doesn't feel good and doesn't feel right, we lose respect for ourselves. We lose, like, those two things don't go well. So we lose respect for ourselves. And when we do that, it's really easy to see people as data points. People are to be manipulated. Who cares about the 97%? Screw those guys. I'm just worried about my number and meeting my number. And that's all that matters. And then the third thing is, once I do that enough, there's no broader purpose of economic benefit and kind of shared meeting of minds. That's where Facebook is today. It has completely dehumanized as an organization. So if we think about, well, what do we do about it? We got to reverse that process. We need to think about what are the three parts of the dehumanization process and how do we do it? So I realized quickly that marketing had no good answer for that. We didn't know. I didn't know. So I had to go find out. I had to go find others who did. And I think a few things really, there are a few kind of three big things that if you can take away from this podcast, what I'd ask you to. The first is, let's talk about kind of losing respect for ourselves. It all starts with, as a marketing professional, and this is just talking with us right now, kind of in our world, but I think the rest of the consumers will help kind of understand, what we need to do. We need to reestablish some respect for ourselves and take care of ourselves. Understand that that what we're trying to do is a high empathy sort of thing. The reason that we're so into data is cold and objective. We need to spend a lot more time with real people. And that is a very high empathy kind of job. When I talked with the nursing staff at the Mayo Clinic, they are high empathy folks as well. They need to deal with patients on a day-to-day basis, very high empathy. And what they were seeing was huge amounts of burnout. That marketing professionals were burning out and, nurses were burning out. What they do is they concentrate on self-care. They concentrate on recharging the battery, because if you're not confident in your own skills, you don't feel good about what you're doing, it's really hard to kind of empathize with someone else. So, taking the time for self-care it sounds fluffy. It sounds like, oh, we're not talking about business at all anymore. But we got to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves. Otherwise, we can't take care of someone else. But to get to your point more specifically on what do we do with other people, it's going to sound really easy. Actually talk with a customer, like a real customer, like a real, not a persona, not a segment. Go spend 50% of your time talking with real people. So from Idka's perspective or from others, you will succeed better by looking at your data less and looking at your people more. Being able to see what is this whole person look like? What is their, what common ground are we seeing? That, yeah, data is great. Data will help you see, okay, we met with 200 people over the course of a few months. Well, how do those 200 people kind of scale up to 200,000 or 2 million? Data is a wonderful way to test hypotheses and assumptions that you've developed in a humanistic sort of way. What I think we're confusing right now is we're saying, oh, well, we're going to forget that human stuff and we're just going to watch behaviors and try to run machine learning that will find correlations in the data. Here's the fundamental problem, marketing folks. Statistics 101 lesson. If you search in a big enough data set with enough time, you will find correlations purely by random chance. That doesn't mean they mean anything. Okay? So it needs to be human guided. So marketing folks and consumers, frankly, need to allow that process to happen more as well. How do we have those kind of connections that help us? Third thing, it can seem all a little overwhelming. It can seem like, holy crap, I don't have any time for self-care. And how am I going to find the time to meet with customers and do more of that? There's nothing I can possibly do to change this. What I learned from the Chabad movement, and I went and found a bunch of rabbis to talk about the mitzvah and talk about what they talk about is any good deed, any small good deed is perfect. That's all that's needed. You don't need to try to change the world. You need to try to do one good thing. So if you're running a pay-per-click campaign, say, you know what? I am not going to try to, I'm not going to try to run some insulting kind of campaign to try to just test how many people are offended by this. You know what? Not offending someone is the right thing to do. I'm gonna step back from that. That tiny little act of saying, you know what? I'm going to do something different. I'm going to, I do have data on these customers. I'm not going to use it. I'm going to destroy it. I'm going to remove it because it's not there. That's the right thing. It's kind of everyone's heard of the golden rule. I think the silver rule is better. The silver rule is its corollary. It says, do not do unto others what you would not like to have them do unto you. And I think with some really basic kind of tips, it seems like, boy, could that be all that it is? Could that be it? Kind of simple, but not easy. It's really simple to know I got to take care of myself. I've got to actually meet with real customers. I've got to, think of people as entire people. And I don't have to try to boil the ocean all at once. I need to just start kind of doing good and doing better. Yeah, really simple stuff, hard to execute in daily practice. You need to actually work at this to make it work. And that's why, frankly, the kind of startups and, folks like Idka getting out there and doing something about it and saying, you know what, we can do that. But I also think there is a role, for the FANG companies. That sounds kind of oddly appropriate, doesn't it?
I'm sorry, a role for the what?
The FANG companies. Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google. I kind of love that acronym. I think it's appropriate. But I think as consumers, we also need to support their efforts when, when they're doing the right thing and when they're trying to do the right thing, that like, no, we support that. Like that's hey, you're going in the right direction. You're doing the right thing. It's not going to be perfect overnight. But I also support like, hey, they're trying to make something better. Let's support that kind of behavior versus simply punishing the bad behavior. And I'm as guilty as that as anyone else, going out there and calling out what they're doing wrong. How often do we call out what they're doing right?
But wait a second, though. I mean, when you talk about what are they doing right, are you talking about like Facebook being the new privacy company?
No, not simply kind of going out there and saying it, because you can say all kinds of things that you like, but where say, okay, on on the newest version of iOS, that your privacy settings are set to kind of maximum privacy by default, and you need to turn on the things that you want to share your information versus the other way, which is, okay, well, I'm going to opt out. Just doing little things like that, even at the app level, at the operating system level, at whatever level it is, just simple changes like that say, hey, that's the right thing to do. That gives people choice, that they can decide what they want to share. If they want to share it, great. Now, some of the bigger issues are if I don't share my information, I don't get access to an entire piece of software.
Right.
Is there a way to make that software work without it? If there is, the next step is, hey, there is a privacy version of that software that you can use. And that takes some creativity, that takes some development, and that might take a new business model. But you start to see, because of this increased awareness around privacy and around treating people as people, you start to see these companies and lots of others. It's not, they're easy to pick on, but if you think about the major healthcare organizations, you think about United Health Group, you think about the Blue Cross organization, you think about the major defense contractors. All of them have tremendous stores of data that impact our lives in a really tangible way. So there's a lot of work to do, and from my perspective, I think that we can be, there's two ways to train your dog. You reward the good behavior, or that you punish the bad. I think we've all done really good at punishing the bad behavior, but we haven't done as good a job at rewarding the good stuff.
Right. Before, we only have a couple minutes, and I wanted to give you a chance to talk about your new book coming out, Rehumanizing Marketing. Jason is working on a book, or well, you tell the audience what the deal is with your book and what it's about.
We've talked a lot in this podcast about what's going wrong, and that's essentially chapter one. We have, there's a lot of that. You can read that anywhere. We've got Surveillance Capitalism is out, and, kind of Team Human is out, and The Rise of the Robots is out. All of those things are out. So you can read more and more of that. Now, I didn't want to write another book where we just talked more about that.
Doom and gloom, right?
Doom and gloom. It's great. It's clickbait is what it is. And, in the next couple of years, because books take a couple of years to get from kind of point A to point B, through the traditional publishing process. So I wanted to try to write a book for where I think we're going to be at a couple of years from now. And I talk about, essentially the book is, okay, yeah, we know what the problem is. How do we fix it? And what can we learn from nurses at the Mayo Clinic? What can we learn from kids with autism and the IEP process? What can we learn from rabbis? What can we learn from romance authors? What can we learn from stand-up comedians? Like, what can we learn from all of these different people who have to solve the same sorts of things that we do in marketing and tech? We think that because we're business people, we're the only ones with any insight on any of that, and we're wrong. So there are wonderful ways that, hey, this is practical. This stuff works because Other folks have made it work for decades. And we need to kind of stop, look there, look at what they're doing, and how do we apply it to what we're doing. And that's the whole point of the book, is how do we take knowledge from them and apply it and kind of rehumanize marketing and reinvent it for a new age.
I think we ran out of time here, but which isn't fair. But I have to ask you: will you come back and talk more about some of the practical, what is good marketing? We have so much more to cover, and maybe you'll come back and join us again.
I'd love to. I think that would be great. I think I'd love to get a little specific on, how do we do statistics the right way, and how do we take kind of a human approach and a data approach and put them together in the right way.
And just tell people, how are they supposed to find this book?
You can learn more, and you can sign up for announcements in my email newsletter at jasontvoiovich.com. That's my blog site, so pretty easy, jasontvoiovich.com. Or if you find me on LinkedIn, you can connect with me there as well. I'm easy to find. I'm on Twitter and I'm on Medium, but LinkedIn is where most people tend to find me, or my blog. So you can sign up there, and I'd love it if you did, because the more people that do, the more my agent, Chris Kepner, love the guy, the more people that sign up, the easier time he has convincing the big publishers that now is the time and they should pick up this book and get it in print.
All right. And if you have any questions for Jason, you can also find us on Idka, www.idka.com, idka.com. You'll see that on your screen. You can start a free account to bring your private groups or organization, and you can also contact us on the contact form on our website. So thanks so much, Jason. It's been a real pleasure, and I can't wait for the next conversation. I can think we just whet people's appetite here.
No, I think so too. Thank you, Elizabeth. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with folks.
All right, Jason. Everyone have a great day, morning, afternoon, evening, and thanks for joining us. See you soon.